Hi, and welcome to my brief talk about the economics of the coronavirus. I just want to say a few things. First, China. China has been for a little while a geopolitical risk, a financial risk, a source of economic risk with their cyber attacks and so on. They keep trying to hack large American companies that have large amounts of data, like Equifax, for instance. I think the Chinese government is criminal in a lot of ways, and this new situation coming out of China with the coronavirus has opened up the possibility that China now represents a health risk. I'd remind investors that this is the latest in a number of major world impacting health issues that have come out of China. And so going forward over the next 10 years, I think the world economy needs to really wrestle with the idea of using China as manufacturer of the world, because the criminal communist organization or the communist government in China seems incompetent and duplicitous. Also, central bank activity I want to talk very, very briefly about. If you're a regular listener of mine, you know that I'm not a big fan of central banks for reasons that I've talked about before. It's great that central banks now stand ready to act, and there's an 80% chance, according to the markets, that the Fed is going to reduce interest rates by at least 25 basis points, possibly 50 on the 18th of March. That's great. But monetary policy isn't a vaccine, and it's really a vaccine that markets want. Until that happens, we're not going to get as much clarity. All the turmoil, though, presents, in my estimation, great opportunity for investors. We're often told that we're supposed to buy low. How do you do that? You can only buy low when everyone else is selling aggressively. And the people who sell aggressively aren't idiots, right? They're not doing it because they don't know what they're talking about. Oftentimes, we look back in history and think, oh, those people who sold in 2008 were idiots, or those people who sold in late 1999 or March 2000 were morons. No, they sold for very, very sound reasons. And people are selling for very, very sound reasons now. It's not about that. What it is about is when you come across a business that is valuable and the market gets ahead of itself on the downside, you have to take advantage of it. And that's why I'm aggressively buying right now. And the reason I'm buying aggressively is because I see there's one of three scenarios going forward. First is that this is another SARS. And if you may remember back in the day, 2003, SARS was, it was a big news story, but it didn't actually have a big effect on the world economy, and it didn't have effect on the market. And so if you bought during that SARS wobble, you would have done well. I don't think we're going to have another SARS, though. I don't think that's very likely because the world economy is much, much more integrated. But if it is another SARS, it's going to be a little bit of a blip in the economy and markets. Scenario 2 is that this is a world ender, and those of you who survive are going to see a chimpanzee on a horse yelling, "Ape home, human home, do not come back" in 5 or 10 years, and you'll remember this moment. I don't think that's a likely scenario either, but if it does happen, I don't think owning stocks now would impact you one way or the other. I think the most likely, though, is the third scenario, which is that the world is going to muddle through as it always does. There's a number of companies that are working on a vaccine as we speak. Turns out in many ways that the coronavirus is actually likely to reduce the number of deaths, because we're seeing that people are becoming much, much more vigilant about hand washing and so on. So flu cases are actually dropping precipitously in Japan. But either way, the bottom line is there's a strong expectation that people are going to muddle through as they always do. I think there's going to be a 1 year, sort of suppression of earnings, but, the world economy is going to muddle through and going to recover. We're going to get a vaccine, as we, likely will. And so, because I think that's the most likely scenario, and because I think stocks are long-dated assets, I'm going to be buying aggressively. We're told oftentimes that you want to buy low, and we always assume, looking backward or looking in the rearview mirror, that the people who sold during market meltdowns were idiots. They were not. They're very, very intelligent people who sold for very, very good reasons. What we have to do, though, if we want to be successful at this, is we have to be willing to plug our nose and buy when everyone else has very good reasons for selling. For instance, right now, Bank of Nova Scotia has got a dividend yield of 5.2%. When something like Bank of Nova Scotia gives you a 5.5% dividend yield, as it is right now, you have to buy it. Period. There's no sort of, no more thought that goes into it than that. Last time it had that, the shares went on to do very, very well. And because investors, really need to invest for cash flow. A 5.2% dividend yield on a company that has a history of raising its dividends every year is just too compelling to pass up, even if people are a little freaked out at the moment. In all three of those scenarios, though, I think it makes the most sense to start buying stocks now. If this is another SARS, it makes sense to buy. If this is a world ender, we should buy stocks because it's irrelevant if we own stocks and it's a world ender. Stocks are going to be irrelevant anyway, so might as well buy. And in scenario 3, which is I think the most likely, this is going to be a little bit of a blip in the history of markets and the history of the world economy, and it presents a fantastic buying opportunity for us, and that's why I myself am buying. So my advice to investors is to keep your head, keep your cool, and understand that if you want to do well at this, you need to buy low, and you can only buy low when everyone else is a bit freaked out. Thank you very much, as usual, for watching, and I look forward to any comments or questions below.
Birds come and cry there, and twitter in the chimney, but I go forever and come.